I remember when I was younger, maybe the snow would get like 2 feet deep, but I've noticed throughout the years it's getting a lot less.
Climate change is impacting our water systems at all levels across New Mexico.
The key word there is change. The climate is changing, and you can see that with the lower snowfalls in the winter and the hit and miss monsoon rains in the summer.
As recent as this last fire season, catastrophic fire in the watersheds is a very scary proposition and very impactful to the future of our water supplies.
It's like an irreversible loss in our lifetimes, and maybe forever, because I don't know how those forests can recover given the kind of climate change that we're seeing and the less snowpack and the higher temperatures.
This summer, 2022, the Rio Grande went dry in the Albuquerque area, and that's kind of scary. It hadn't been that in a long time.
Why is water important to anybody? You know, we need it to survive.
The population growth rate here in Taos is unsustainable. We have the water resources for the current population, but if our population doubles or triples, we no longer have enough water for everyone's domestic use and agricultural use.
It all started kind of the 1995-96 season when we really started seeing a decline, and it's really just continued since then.
And we've stayed in this place probably through many droughts, many different natural disasters, and we're still farming and growing food.
And there was an understanding up and down the stream that your neighbors would starve if they didn't have access to that water. And so there was an incentive for everyone to share.
And in northern New Mexico, we have such a long history of human habitation and humans coexisting with these natural systems and these natural processes for so long that the impacts of these really sudden perturbances on the watershed are very easy to classify, and the effects are stark.
We have so many leaders who are older and just have like this kind of one-track way of thinking, and I think it's honestly holding us back.
We simply cannot rely on Mother Nature to always provide, perhaps in the way that she has in the past. We have to be willing to compromise with one another and be willing to adapt to the uncertainty that Mother Nature is going to give us.
In 15 years, I see two options for our water situation here in Taos. Either we preserve our agricultural lands where we store surface water in the ground, or development takes over our agricultural lands and no longer gives us the option to store our surface water in the ground.
When you change the hydrology and you change the way that water comes off of these mountains, suddenly those systems are overwhelmed with water in the early spring when runoff comes as a huge spike, and then there's not enough head in the acequia to deliver water to most farmers for the rest of the season.
Our headwater wetlands are the sponges of our watershed. They soak up spring runoff and then slowly release water over the growing season.
In the acequias, we consider water a community resource. It's integral to our everyday life. It's something that we share. It's something that we can visualize and feel it. But under the American system of law, water is a commodity, and it's a paper asset that can be bought and sold, and it can be severed from the land. And that commodification of water is part of that death by 1,000 cuts. Because if you start selling those water rights out of the acequia, it will unravel the fabric of that community. And that's happening. It's happening here in Taos. It's happening all over the state.
We're trying to re-engineer our natural water systems, which when left alone work great and have for tens of thousands of years, for millions of years. And since the population is growing so fast, humans think that they need to re-engineer this system and can somehow outsmart ourselves, basically.
I'm far more interested in finding scale-appropriate solutions.
Drought, lack of precipitation, lack of moisture has happened in the past, fires have happened in the past. We need to be adaptive.
And if you think of acequias as a body, It helps visualize water as a life giver, and that acequias are like a circulatory system that brings water to the land and makes life possible. That it makes it possible to grow food.
It really is going to take a fundamental shift in human behavior at all levels of our state and our communities.
We need to educate our kids a lot more in environmental issues because they're going to be our leaders and they're going to be the ones making the decisions on all of that.
I think now we need to teach our children that we have a direct effect on our environment.
People are complicated and our systems are complicated and society is complicated. And, I think a lot of us in this business, in this field, did some real soul searching this year. Are we able to continue tinkering in ways that we think are for the ultimate benefit of the stability of these ecosystems and for our communities, where things don't go haywire or sideways?
I think one way that we could get by, specifically with growing food with less water, is to look at ways of farming from the indigenous people who have been here before.
I think it is going to take a community-based, holistic approach, utilizing federal and state resources to put us on a corrective path in terms of what constitutes a healthy watershed, and move us in that direction, and then make continued ongoing investments on a recurring basis so that the watersheds never degrade to the conditions that they were allowed to do in the past.
So it's time for New Mexico to step up.
The problem is that there's not much money to be made in hay or a lot of agriculture that uses this type of flood irrigation. And then there's also families, generational families that have been here that have used the water in this way, but they're growing older and the next generation is not taking up farming the way the older generations have.
My grandson knows the importance of water because I have him helping me irrigate. Although he dreads it now, he's 14 and he's a teenager, and he'd rather be on his computer, his iPad or whatever, doing stuff that's, to his generation is more thrilling than being out in the field and irrigating or cleaning a ditch. And yet I've taught him that it's important that we do these things because in the long run, it's going to make his life easier.
There's a number of reasons that give me hope. Number one is like you guys, our next generation coming forward is taking the time to really engage and learn about what's important and what we want to, what sort of future do we want in New Mexico?
Right, we're all interconnected, and we're interconnected both environmentally and economically. And what we want to do is make sure something we're so dependent on, such as the environment, right, is like a primary stakeholder in what we do.
Stop talking and sit and observe just the land you're sitting on, like how the water flows, where it falls, how the bugs are, how they react to like what you're doing, how plants do in the soil and what you're growing on. I think just giving plants and land time and patience like that and the observance that it needs, you really understand like how much water you really need too.